why I think it is a good idea, not necessarily the best idea, but why it's a good idea to attack the wings of, the north and south as the primary objectives versus the primary objectives in the center. Now, yes, we've mentioned the idea of politics and how politics are perception, warfare is a political act. Those are just facts. Okay. Not should be or shouldn't be, it's a fact. We'll get him up to there. So, taking that into consideration, yes, if the enemy, or if one side perceives that the war is lost, or that can't be won, or things aren't just going well, they don't do as well. So yeah, that is a reason to take Moscow. But there's another reason that doesn't really factor in on just about all of the earlier campaigns. World War I maybe being the exception. It really starts factoring in probably in World War I, but definitely factors in World War II, but doesn't come into whether, like I referenced earlier, Alexander the Great or Napoleon's invasion of, the Central Asian landmass, maybe, what we want to call Russia, as being something that is sort of an endless thing, that the enemy can keep retreating from you because they just can. Because back then, even in the Napoleonic Wars, a sharp pointy stick is still an effective weapon. And yeah, normally we're talking about a sharp pointy stick with a piece of metal on the end of it, a spear, is still an effective weapon. And it's still a very effective weapon, not just, oh yeah, I can still kill people, because you can't convince me that during the Revolutionary War era, or the Napoleonic eras, the early days, that with those levies in mass that the French were raising up and throwing against the invaders, of the royalist invaders of France in the early days, if you will, that all of those muskets that were being used in frontline units were serviceable muskets, meaning that would fire and would operate properly. You can't convince me of that, because I'm sure that, and I'm not just talking about 1 in 10,000 not working. I'm talking somewhere at least 1% to 5% weren't working, because even when you're talking about a professional royal army that France had before, I'm sure their frontline units, not all of the muskets were serviceable as they were going into combat with them. And we see the levies en masse that the French were using, and Napoleon in essence refines that with his column attacks and whatnot that he's using up until to the Battle of Waterloo. That it's the bayonet is the thing. It's not, volume of fire is important. Napoleon uses volume of fire often with artillery as being very important. But still, often, especially for the French and their columns of attack, it's the bayonet is the deciding factor in it. Now, Wellington and his tactics uses firepower and use terrain, and I know if you've been around, you've heard me talk about his use of terrain and firepower and how I use it, some of his tactics in modern day operations, like with Armored Brigade. And I'm using Wellington-esque tactics to do some of that. So when you're looking at that, you still see in the Napoleonic era, a sharp stick with a point on it, a bayonet, a musket with a bayonet, or just a pole with a bayonet, or just a farm implement, is still useful if used in a large amount of people. And I'm talking not just useful for some partisan type activities, but useful in major decision-based battles. Waterloo, attacking with sharp pointy sticks, bayonets that Napoleon, or they not so much, the old guard goes in and tries, or you're looking at Wellington forming his squares. Yes, they were shooting out of the squares, but in essence, the square is grounded muskets with bayonets on them, keeping the horses away, with them using, well, it's not a sharp pointy stick, but they may have had some Polish lancers there, but I don't know that they did by that time. But definitely, sabers. Interesting, though, IRC, most of the charges were not pressed home. You go, absolutely. Blam or Rama, usually one side would break and run first, although, since can't point to a source. Oh, you're absolutely right. It's the morale of the war is often decided down to the point of one side deciding to give ground, to give up. It is not primarily dependent upon killing the enemy. Now, of course, seeing the enemy around, or your friends around you dying, makes you want to give up. And you're absolutely right. A lot of the time, they weren't pressed home. And even when successful, they weren't pressed home. But that bayonet, if you read accounts of the battles, often was used in the pursuit of the fleeing enemy, and running down and stabbing them with it as much or more than shooting the fleeing enemy as they're fleeing. So it's not necessarily, like I use on the banner of my channel, the Battle of Culloden, in which the Highlanders impact into a formed line of the enemy and battle it out. Now, they do break two battalions in that battle, but the battalion in the second line of the formed English pour musket fire into both friends and enemy, and break the charge with firepower ultimately there and whatnot. So sometimes, yes, it is charged home with, but in that campaign, the first major battle, a lot of the government soldiers break before the Highlanders, with their, they're doing mostly a sword and shield charge, break before the Highlanders get there. But the slaughter happens as they're running away, and the Highlanders are, whether in the back or people are turning and fighting, are doing it in melee. So I know Das Tactic was using some Highlanders earlier in the previous stream here. So yeah, horses don't want to run into bayonets, absolutely. But sometimes horses can't turn to the right or left because there's horses to the right or left, and so they do go on to charge onto bayonets. There are cases in which cavalry does break a well-formed square, but I only specifically know of one notable case of that during the Napoleonic Wars. Well-formed square, steady troops, that kind of thing. Mostly it's on shaky squares or squares that have been shot up a lot or whatever, and then they come in. So sharp pointy sticks, the point, I'm trying to make it down to the essence of sharp pointy sticks up until the Napoleonic and even into the American Civil War era are still a primarily effective means of fighting, because if you can have your mass of people with literally just pikes, cheap pikes, and charge an enemy in the American Civil War. Now you can do Pickett's charge, and they all get shot up by musketry fire before they get to the enemy lines. But if you can get it in a case in which you can get across the field before the enemy can mow you down, you can win. Now, most of the soldiers are equipped with muskets. Most of the soldiers, if they just had pikes, would maybe not feel that chance of success good enough to actually push the charge home and win, but it's still effective. But that is not the case in World War II. You can set up, 10,000 guys with pikes, 500 Germans with a lot of ammunition and standard sort of German, even 1941 loadouts with MG34s, MP40s, Mauser rifles, all going. depending, we could, surprise them in the middle of the darkness and whatever, the Germans will lose. But we're talking an open battlefield. Firepower will win. Oh, if you have a couple of tanks standing around there, they'll just start shooting their machine guns at all those guys. So industry is a major factor in this war. So, although, and I was earlier talking about how this is sort of like endlessly retreatable, and not necessarily always retreat to the rear, especially if you're talking earlier, you can retreat to the sides, you force the enemy to disperse their military power out along a large front, as well as disperse the military power in depth, antipartisan, that kind of thing, will weaken an excellent invading force. So it is practically, in that sense, realize it's an endless battlefield. It just really is. But as history has shown, no insurgency will win if there is the political and military will to oppose it, so long as you can keep the insurgents from having a supply of modern weapons and munitions. Case in point, you can have like the Malaya emergency, Britain's counterinsurgency operations in Malaya through the use of the Royal Navy and the very narrow land bridge of Malaya up into Thailand, that they were able to very effectively cut off resupply of the insurgents and over time defeat the insurgency in Malaya. Where if you look at both the French and the Americans in Indochina and later Vietnam, you had the enemy getting supplies, whether from Soviet Union or China, and neither side was able to cut it off. Dien Bien Phu operation was there, setting up the French base there to cut off supplies coming into the Viet Minh. So their only way that they were able to win there is because they couldn't choke off supply. Well, the Soviet Union, if you can choke off its supply of modern weaponry, tanks, aircraft, bullets, you can win. Now the question comes down to, where is your industry and can you move it? Now the Soviets were able to move massive amounts of industry that was sort of in, the Western Soviet Union here, back to the east. They had already been building up under Stalin, I think more than the Germans realized, amount of industry back here. Because you're starting to get back into here. The Germans don't have much penetration back into here in knowledge. Do realize that the Germans had bases in the Soviet Union prior to invading it. That's something that people don't often realize. Now, the bases in the interior of the Soviet Union were before World War II kicks off, for the most part. They had them under the Weimar Republic, some training test camps deep into the Soviet Union that the Reichswehr was using to develop new tactics and training alongside Soviets and developing it. Even the early Nazi era, they continued some of these secret training camps and bases. Now, these aren't large bases with division-sized units or anything like that, but it clearly shows that German military personnel, and I'm sure German Abwehr personnel, were traveling deep into the Soviet Union to these bases and out. They even had, for a while, becomes unnecessary after Norway, but they even have a secret submarine base up here in this area in the Soviet Union. The Germans did, the Nazis did, as part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. So, and there's a lot of trade going on. There's even setting up after the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. There's even an air link, flights a few times a week. I don't think it was quite daily, between Berlin and Moscow. So you have a fair amount of German penetration of knowledge of what's happening in this part of the Soviet Union. I'm not talking detailed pictures necessarily, but they sort of have a clue of what's going on. I don't think they were getting a look back into here, and Stalin, in his industrialization of Russia, I try to use my terms correctly, because sometimes I'm talking about Russia, sometimes I'm talking, the geographical area, sometimes I'm talking about the Soviet Union, which is a political entity, kind of thing. So I'm using going back and forth. So he was industrializing back here prior to the start of the war, but they also moved massive amounts of industry. Had the Germans considered that, I don't think the movement of industry, I don't think they considered that a likeliness, likely of any significant amount. But had they considered that a possibility, I'm not going to say it would have been easy, but it would have been practical to bomb and do sabotage raids deep into the Soviet Union to blow bridges and other things, railway bridges, and get the people out, because the Germans had them, like we see the British using short takeoff and landing aircraft that you can land in fields, come in and out at night. And it wouldn't have taken a lot to blow a few bridges in a few places, because we can see the rail hub around Moscow. They could have dramatically hampered the moving of the industry. And if the Soviets do not have the industry, they can't survive against a major war. And I think this is, and we did talk about earlier, the political reasons that Moscow and whatnot was the objective, ideological, maybe I should say, reasons that Moscow was an objective. But it is also an industrial, including the railway network, connecting all this stuff. Objective. Tula is a major arsenal down here. Where's Tula? I know I just zoomed in and focused out. Where was it? Tula right here is a major arsenal, if they could get a hold of that. And you cut down the ability of the Soviets to produce, both weapons and munitions. And so that is a reason to secure the center in a modern warfare situation versus a Napoleonic. So that, yes, that is a counter argument to one that I just made earlier, because I'm not saying I have the definitive way that they should have attacked versus what they did do. It's just an option that I think is a viable and good one and might have brought victory in the East. I believe they only had 3 single-lane railroads that went east-west Moscow as well. Yeah, I think this is accurate here, and we can see the different rail links here. And I know I've talked about this in length. Again, if you haven't followed my channel on YouTube, or particularly there, I've talked about a lot of this in playing other games in much more detail than I'm going to do here today. But Moscow is the central hub of the rail links. We can see how, there's, shall we say, dead-end rail links that probably go to particular factory towns or mines or whatever and don't connect up. We can see them all over here. But realize that if you're getting a resource out here and you have a factory up here, you can, a lot of it, major rail links, as in, like you're talking about double length or double width or triple width rails and how much they can handle, is probably flowing something like this. But if you take Moscow out of it, you've got secondary rail links, and they're probably wandering all over here. And so you're going to end up taking twice as long to get the resources, whether the resource is a thing like coal or other fuel, or whether it's steel, or whether it's just a component. Tanks aren't very good without their tank sights, optics for the main guns. Or the main guns themselves. So if you have a gun factory that's producing gun barrels, and then you have another factory that's doing the steel manufacture, making the big steel components of the tank, and then assembling them, and if you've got to move the stuff any significant different, a critical point, you only have so much, rail traffic that you can do. You only have so many engines, you only have so many box cars, and if it takes twice as long to get whatever it is from point A to point B takes twice as long. That means only half as much of the stuff can get there in a given amount of time. And it means choices between more coal or tank optics getting to the needed place, or whatever it is. And by slowing that up in and of itself slows up industrial activity. And that is a crucial element with Russia and Moscow in particular. And if you were to take this and you need to get something from here down to here, you've got to go like all the way out, somewhere out here to then somewhere down here, as opposed to coming through the sort of central plan to main hub. And so there is a very, very good reason to go after Moscow. And I didn't say there wasn't, I just said I think there are other objectives. Okay, we're going to move you forward. Okay, you're back here. Where do we want to go with you? Yeah, I'm still playing the game, but I like talking with you guys about these historical possibilities, if you will. To me, they're interesting, and to me, this is why I play these games. I don't play these games just to prove that I'm good at playing the game, whatever the game is. Like, the idea of chess or checkers, that's to play the game good. I like to connect with the history that I'm playing. Okay, so I think we've done pretty good here. So this is turn one. We did achieve the goal, and effectively, in my opinion, of taking Riga. Turn one, we pushed up along this railway link here. We didn't connect through here, but we do have a solid connection coming up through here. And that's what we need to keep in mind. Pushing out through here we will be doing with our infantry. I do plan on that, but we're going to push up here. Now, I don't know if we're going to try to go, and I don't know that we're going to get there today with all my talking and just time it takes, if we're going to go to try to do another god-awful battle in Narva, or swing south and avoid it and push for Moscow, which is probably what my inclination, though I do want to scoop up what terrain here. And turn without, oh, no, okay, no. We're going to turn on AID, allow, yeah. Manager depots, yes. Again, there's a lot of nuances to this game. Like I say, I'm playing quick here and talking and hanging out with you guys more than I'm trying to play it. But if you want to get into the details of the game, this is great for this game. This is a excellent game for these kinds of things. I would, for a theater strategic game, this is probably the best. And notice I say theater as opposed to grand strategy, meaning the whole war, or down to tactical, obviously, squads or whatever, and individual tanks moving around. There's other better games for that. And I have not played War in the West or War in the Pacific. I played some of War in the East 1, and now some of this here. But this is one of the best, even though it's turn-based, even though it's not simultaneous movements of everything at once. There are limitations, and partially it's just human limitations of things. Okay, this game looks really good. Can't wait for it to come out. No, we're out. It's War in the East is out now. Play the original War in Russia in the 80s. No, I did not. Blamorama. I did not. I was more of a Avalon Hill's Third Reich kind of player. If we're looking at games back in there. So yeah, the game. If you're looking for War in the East out, is out. It's you can get it. So yeah, I go back to those days, before any of this was on the computer, playing war games. I'm, yes, that old. Now, I guess from what I'm seeing, we don't have Fog of War on. I didn't mean to not have it on. In those early days, they had total air superiority and an abundance of medium bombers, ideal for, yes, absolutely, you could have bombed a lot. And you don't have to totally destroy something. You just have to interrupt effective, large-scale movement of rail operations. And so had they planned some of that, bombing deep enough in, I don't know. I just don't think it occurred to them to stop, because you got to understand. There was some, I believe, and I'm not an expert on all the details, but there was some, frontline ground support in the early days of Barbarossa, but a lot of it was targeted at destroying the Soviet Air Force. I mean, to my understanding, the overwhelm in the early days, not Barbarossa, as they're moving towards Moscow, but early days of Barbarossa, a lot of the air operations are set up to destroy the Soviet Air Force, which I think they should be. But I think, like you talk about the medium bombers, they're few, if you will, starting to into heavy bombers, but most of the stuff, the Germans we would categorize as medium bombers even for the time. If you had done a lot of that, you don't, and the Germans, especially the industry in the west of the Soviet Union, I don't think they targeted, because they sort of anticipated, and they were proven correctly, that they were going to very rapidly overtake that area of the Soviet Union. So why bomb a factory if you're going to be occupying it in 5 days? And 5 days of production of, machine gun bullets or tanks probably aren't going to mean a hell of a lot, and you want to roll in and take it. At least that's how I would be thinking. And they did not anticipate, they did not have the idea that sort of in the mid-period, because it isn't the earliest days, sort of the mid-period, once it's clear that the Soviet front is collapsing, that the Soviets start to really move their industry. Had they understood what was happening, and I just don't know what their intelligence was like. They have spies. They're getting spy information, sometimes misinformation, but they're getting spy information about what's going on in the Soviet Union. They're getting aerial observation. They're getting prisoner of war, whether it's be things like officers captured, or whether it's local mayors or whatever being captured. They're not, whether they're just not paying attention or they're not getting the word about the industrial shift. I'm sure that there was information to be under. I'm sure they got information that it was going on, but I don't know that it was understood. Meaning like, oh yeah, no, they moved the factory out 2 days before you got here, sir. When somebody's saying when they get to Vilnius or pick a city, and then to realize, wait a minute, they're moving factories east. Maybe we ought to start doing this bombing in. They never get clued into that. And okay, what is Nan's not the beard? What is it? Do you think that if it wasn't for Stalin purges the overall performance of the Soviet Union? Oh, absolutely. Oh, the purges do two things that are critical, and we see this most clearly shown, and they start to correct it after the the invasion of Finland, the Winter War. Is one, they get rid of a lot of talented people. They get rid of people who are those that could be leading at all levels. The Soviet military, from the highest, the field marshal type level, all the way down to, NCOs. They get rid of a lot of talented people. And two, they put fear into all the officers to make decisions. Fear of making decisions, and that's the one thing you don't want in a leader. And that is whether we're talking about a squad leader or a field marshal. You don't want to be walking in a squad and being ambushed and having your squad leader pause and think about what to do. You would rather have him do something, charge the enemy, run away, run back the way you came, run to the left, run to the right, tell everybody, follow me, guys, and run in some direction. You'd rather have them do something than just be indecisive, okay, and wait for instructions or wait for the situation to become clear or whatever it may be. So it's the dual thing. It's getting rid of a lot of good key people, and those, whether good or bad, that remain, they now fear making the wrong decision. It isn't until the last days of the Third Reich does a German officer fear for his life for making a bad decision. And it's really only sort of in the post, a Stauffenberg plot that you start seeing actual purges. Now, the German officer, whether for political reasons or others, might fear dismissal from the service. Like, oh, you refused, or you did something stupid in the battle, in the invasion of the Battle of France. Oh, okay, you're fired. Go home. You might get that. It's sort of the worst thing you're going to happen to you. We're not talking about treason or something like that, but just the worst thing from making a bad decision is going to happen to you is be fired. So you're willing to take, and the Germans very much wanted, from their NCOs to their lower ranking officers, wanted them to make decisions on the spot as they're fighting. They're very flexible command. I want to scroll back up and get some of these comments. I will wonder out loud if they had enough airplanes to support troops, assembly areas, etc. No, I will say, Blamorama, my evaluation, and it's partially from playing War in these two, shockingly light on the air capabilities in the early days. And that can be a factor, a real factor in decision of allocating air assets. They didn't, in my opinion, have enough to do it as it is. But still, I would put more things in it. Plus, again, the Germans actually know that what was the Soviets were doing before they arrived in cities in Ukraine and Donetsk Basin. The factories have been found in. Well, they have to, gangsta. When you're especially in the early days, you're talking about the invasion of Ukraine. They're welcomed with open arms by the people. The people are like, hey, great to be here. And when, where's this factory? Whatever, made toasters that you could, turn it into making helmets or belt buckles or something useful for the war, or whether it's a heavier industry factory or something. They show up and the factory's empty. Somebody's got to be telling somebody in the German forces, hey, the such and such factory in Kiev got moved 5 days before you showed up, or wherever it would have been. I don't know, where I don't know the cities that they when they started to evacuate. That has to come into the Germans' knowledge. Now, it doesn't necessarily come into the high command's knowledge, but it has to be somewhere along the chain of command. They've got to be informed of this. There is, especially we can talk in the Ukraine, there is, and as well as in the Baltic states, there is a friendly population for the Germans to show up into, and everywhere else in the Soviet Union, there is a disaffected anti-Soviet element that is very willing to inform the Germans what's going on. I don't know that the Germans trust it, but it exists. So, and then of course they can go into where the factory was located and realize, yeah, all the, the building's still here, but all the machines are gone. So whatever these people may or may not be lying to us, the actual fact is the building's empty and the machines are gone. You replace veterans, many of who have been in the Tsarist army, with a load of political apparatchiks. Yes, Stalin did that. Okay, thanks. So in other words, Stalin undermined himself when he purged. Absolutely. Now, he, of course, was worried about with the purges, and I think Zhukov was for the purge had the war not happened, because he was having too good of a success against the Japanese at the Khalkhin Gol. But I think the German invasion saved Zhukov, and but he is seen by a threat by Stalin, especially including his success at the Battle of Berlin. So yeah, Stalin is paranoid that his generals will be the real threat. This is what you have to understand. Revolutionaries, their biggest fear, and you can see it in the French Revolution, you can see it in the Russian Revolution and others, their biggest fear is the military, their military. And whenever you see, to this day, governments, and I'm not getting political in particular ones, but you can think about them, is when you see the political establishment fearing their own military more than foreign threats, understand that they are a revolutionary viewpoint and they fear their military more than they fear what the outside world can do to them. That's their first concern. You see that in the French Revolution. They fear their officer corps is going to be royalists. They fear the officer corps more than they fear the invading foreign armies. I'm not saying they don't fear the invading foreign armies, but they fear their own officer corps more. Because the way revolutions happen, they are a breakdown of the earlier orders of society. Normally, the army has an allegiance to that earlier order of society, of stability, of whatever. And although they may understand that there was something wrong with, Louis the 16th or Nicholas II and the Tsarist government, and they may think, there may be overwhelmingly thought in the average officers at the start or midpoint of World War I of the Russian army, we're talking the Tsarist Russian army officers, the midpoint, there needs government reforms. Maybe not wanting to get rid of the Tsar, but wanting government reforms. And they may be all for that, but they are still part of the old system, and the revolutionaries that take over fear them more than they do the enemy. Let me continue. Go through. Bet the quality of the generals improved as new generations of generals began to see just what it was like and not making the decision. Well, as time goes on during the war, they allow more decision making from the officers. But unlike any of the other major forces during World War II, and that includes Nazi Germany, the only ones that have a consistent commissar program, meaning political officers that can overrule your military officers, is the Soviet Union. And that's from before and through to the end of the war. Every single captain, I believe, but definitely colonels and generals, has a commissar sitting next to him that can order that guy's death, or basically pull out a gun and shoot him, and not and just claim, oh, he said something against counter-revolutionary or betraying it, or he can just say anything. He doesn't have to give the truth. It can kill you. So you have a guy sitting next to you that can kill you throughout the war in the Soviet Union. So it gets better than it was in the early days, local actual command decision making. But you still have the commissar up until the end of the war. And that is a critical thing in the command chain of decisions. Realizing a condition is something on the battlefield, goes up to whatever appropriate command level, decides what we're going to do about that command, that condition, whether it's time to attack or time to retreat or time to whatever, time for an artillery barrage, whatever it might be, goes up to there, and then from the command gets that effect to the front line, which it might be very close to the front line. I'm not talking like from Moscow to the front line. I'm just talking maybe from a platoon to battalion headquarters back to the platoon kind of thing. The command loop. And whenever you have commissars sitting in and watching that command loop discussion, it's not a good thing. Because the anti-Soviet U.S. was very strong. Yes, the Holodomor, many organization called, mostly the SD. It was an organization. Yes, I know about the SD. But see, the SD never was sitting around all the German officers. They existed. They were mostly running around, massacring people, undesirable people, including Jews, but all kinds of undesirable people. The SD was everywhere, but they weren't embedded in the military situation. They weren't political officers within the military, as it were. That's a significant difference. Traditional military always top heavy. Yeah, true. Okay. Hello, John Kaminsky. Okay. that was a Civil War relic, if I'm not mistaken. You mean the commissars? Well, yeah, they were there, they were most assuredly there in the Civil War. Okay, so now we're only on turn 2. I know I'm talking a lot, but these turns take a lot, and I hope this is an interesting presentation. So we again start out with the operation phase. I'm keeping it on AI. Yeah, commissars, yeah. Now they start in the Civil War. And you know, why you have a red unit, you know. Something company or greater, you know, in the Russian Civil War, you have, you know, Reds. Why aren't you trusting that red unit? You know, supposedly the unit is made up of personnel that support your revolution. Now, if it's made up of people that don't support your revolution, and whether you're talking a company, a battalion, whatever, they can shoot, the men of the unit can shoot the commissars and march to the other side. And I think that happens at times. So, well, many Reds were, okay, right, but why would Private X somewhere be any better informed than Commissar Y if the white officer is doing something naughty, you know, like trying to switch sides or somehow behaving badly? So, and if you don't have officers that you trust, get rid of them. You know, so you say like former whites, yeah. Well, there were a lot of officers who saw what was wrong with the Soviet Union, or I mean, with Imperial Russia. We're gonna, yes, execute. This is the AI air directives. Hopefully, they're making good decisions. I'm letting this all go, and you can also, as you go along, playing it manually, you can move up the air HQs. You don't want to move them beyond rail, good supply rail links, so keep that in mind. You know, because we can see, you know, damaged rail or something somewhere here. So you want to move them up to keep them supporting, but you don't want to move them faster than your repairing of your rail links. And so were needed, and that was understood, so kept them in line with properly indoctrinated commissars. Yeah, but it's just that tells me that your system that you're trying to do is not well supported. Okay, so we're going to continue to push on the flanks. I don't know that we're going to get Vilnius this turn. Well, we sort of did. And you want to move up some of your rearmost units here. And we're going to try to connect up the rail links here. Okay, the Wehrmacht was based on initiative from its officers. Absolutely, their system worked. Thus, the German generals at the decision decided broad objectives. Aims called the colonel, brigade. Absolutely. Now the colonel calls on the majors. Yes, very much. That's my understanding. What Plastic Gangster's given is my understanding is how the German system worked. The Germans were probably whoever said Leninism was well supported besides Lenin. Oh well, absolutely. But I'm just talking about how and why the revolutionaries distrusted their officers is because they're revolutionaries and it doesn't necessarily make sense. Okay, so we have, I don't know where. Okay, we need to sort of keep focused. Now I want to try to get up through here to be able to have a secondary supply route and not just through Riga. So we do want to move, we do want to sort of occupy into here. Again, this is sort of an artificial boundary of operations between Army Group Center and Army Group South. Obviously, once Germany connects up through some of these other railways, you would be using them to support Army Group North, but we don't have that in this scenario, so we're going to move up here to try to connect up some of these. And I'm trying to do these as sort of early as can. moving up some of the rear units to the front. Every German soldier was expected to learn and know the duties of the rank above them. Absolutely. No, Germany, like I was saying, had probably the most flexible command arrangements. Unlike the propaganda, I watch a lot of movies made during World War II, unlike the propaganda that makes them out as some sort of, you know, we got to have a nice massacre of in Riga here, so we're going to move up the Polizei division so they can massacre all the bad people as they would see in you know, Jews and others, gypsies and others, massacre. Have a nice murder party in Riga here. And there was basically a murder party in Riga. I think that would be a good description of what I've seen of films, you know, real films of the period. I don't mean like Hollywood films. I mean like film footage of murder parties in the street killing people in Riga. Yeah, yeah. There's really bad stuff going on in World War II, which I'm bringing up now, but I know mostly we look at this as an intellectual exercise, which is cool. I think I'd rather be here. But we have to keep it in mind. Okay. Should have done a deliberate attack the first time, because now I'm doing the deliberate attack now. Oh, it's not letting me. Do I not have the points? What did I click funny? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, where do we have a security unit? Do we have a security unit around here? I want to... they're pretty weak. There we are. Oh shit! Do we have an undo button here on this? Does anybody know if we have an undo button on this game? I didn't mean to move this railway supply unit. It was also selected with that. Damn. I know. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. Yes, there is. Okay, good. Let me see if I can find it. I don't want to continue to do that. Oh, we're trying to. Can't remember where. And I don't mean to use undo buttons for, you know, I didn't like the outcome of the battle or. But misclicks like that, yeah, undo buttons. Oh boy. I don't know if it's really important, but I would prefer not to have my next to control. Find the shortcut list. Okay, shortcut list. That is admin hotkey list. Okay. Yeah. Don't know if it's in. Any sort of undo last move. You. Okay, there we go. Let's hit you. May not undo last move. Ah. Okay, I meant to move the security unit, not meant to move the rail fixing unit. Damn. Oh well. Yeah, but it's not letting me do that for some reason here. I don't know why. Bummer. Got to pay attention a little better, I guess. Okay, we got to keep him on, well. I'm going to try to come up through here. Oh, yeah, I'm not giving up the sort of central focus here, but I do want to make sure we secure the rail links. Was it discovered? Yeah, I may have discovered a Russian unit or something up here, maybe. I don't know. It's just a pain. It's obviously something I get the idea that for game playing there are reasons to not have it. But hey, if people are going to cheat, they're going to cheat. If they want to cheat, you know. I don't know that that is a good enough reason not to. And so, like I was saying earlier, we have the industrial difference between earlier invasions of Russia and Germany's, 1941 invasion of Russia. Definitely do give more reason to have focused on Moscow. And the Germans, like I say, the Germans had a fair amount of penetration into the Soviet Union, so they knew, a lot of what's going on. Okay, what's under here? What do we have here? Okay, between those divisions, I think we're good, so we'll move into southern Estonia with Totenkopf. See that these principles probably in effect in all Western armies by now. You're talking about the command elements. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that comes into it. Getting rid of some of the rigidity of command. The United States Army was much more rigid in its command and decision. I don't know. I would say it. I went through Army ROTC training as far as I got into the armed forces in college. I don't know if today, and it's been many years since then, how much flexibility compared to the German system. I mean, it's gotten a lot closer than it was in World War II, but I don't know if it's quite the same yet. And the sort of things I just think of the frequent cock-ups officer. Yeah, I know, but it was, yeah, absolutely that happens. But this railway unit coming in, I guess we can repair that one little bit of track there. It's just sort of frustrating because that wouldn't have happened in real life because I wanted them to move up this railway link and connect things up. Used in the Wehrmacht. It's in the Danish army and probably standard NATO practice. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I would, and again, so much taking back in the 90s when I was in Army ROTC getting training. Not that they did, they definitely wanted us to think for ourselves if what's happening, but I think to a point there was still a bit more of, here's how we, now maybe it was just because this was ROTC and they're doing the training. That very well could be. I'm trying to take my experience. I know some of you are more recent veterans than my experience back in the 90s, and again, it's more, ROTC training. A little bit more, but this is supposedly how it was supposed to happen. A bit more of a, take this, have this platoon move to this hill to cover fire there, a battalion commander telling, company commander, have this platoon move over to this position and cover fire from there, then have third platoon move up and assault or something like that. That's my impression, is a little bit more detailed direction. That's my impression, I'm saying here. Then, yeah, company commander, take that hill, but here are your boundaries to the, your left and right, so you don't, because you need boundaries to your left and your right, so you don't bump into friendly units that have boundaries that meet your boundaries. Now, if you don't have friendly units meeting your boundaries, that's a different matter. But if you're, if you're like, you're a company commander, you have a battalion moving forward, and then obviously there's battalions on either side of you or whatnot, or maybe not. But if there's not, then you don't have, say, a left boundary line if there's no forces on your left. But if you're moving forward, you'll have your boundary decision, and so your company area of operation is this. So you don't start moving in front of the other company, and the soldiers or somebody sees movement and decides to shoot at it, and it's friendly. Now of course people get lost and go out of their boundaries. So it was more than just, here's your boundaries and here's your objective. Take this hill, cross this river, whatever it might be. It was a bit more. Now again, that might be more in the lines of that it was ROTC, but it wasn't. But this was giving examples of what it should be done, not what you should, not training is this is how to do it, because we also had those, bounding fire and all that kind of training too, but more in some of the stuff, writing some of the orders. So I don't know details, like I said, got only as far as Army ROTC and not fully in, not ex-military, but this could, because comm technology is so much better than it was, making it easier for commanders to manage further down. Absolutely. The Ronald Reagan, or at least the White House staff of Ronald Reagan, was in contact with the literal guy pulling the trigger in Lebanon. Okay, I guess this map is big enough we can go down here. During the American occupation in Beirut, trying to do peacekeeping forces, we're getting fire from from a position in Civil War Lebanon, and whether it was a guy who's going to drop a mortar bomb, fire or like a La rocket, or shoot a machine gun, can I fire on this target, was literally coming from the White House. Okay, it may have not been President Reagan, but it was, can we fire it? And they were, and the people in the White House, had a map. This is, not even modern, today's modern, but this is, this is before before the web. There technically the internet existed, but there was no www then. So before the web, the White House had a map, had all the positions of the Marines, had marked out supposedly positions of the various militias and areas controlled, and we're getting fire from this building at these coordinates on the map. Can I return fire? And that was being decided in Washington, D.C. coming out of the White House, at least part of the Beirut occupation back in the 80s. And I got this from veterans. A very good friend of mine was sitting right out here when the Marine barracks were blown up. He was a Marine Corps and was part of the I don't know if he made it into the initial rescue operations, but definitely part of the recovery, because they went through and got all the bodies out of there. He was part of the recovery of operations from the Marine barracks being blown up. But he was sitting off on one of the ships when it blew up. Is why not that for sure he would have been in the barracks at the time as opposed to somewhere on the front lines or whatever, but one of the main reasons he wasn't in the barracks as it was blown up was there a very good friend of mine that I now haven't seen in more than 10 years, but I spent 10 years doing a lot of things together with him. And so I've got some of this from veterans that were very closely involved in this stuff. So that was a command and control loop to Washington, D.C., but a direct one as to whether you get to fire today at that spot or not, kind of thing. So, yeah, the ability to micromanage your commanders encourages commanders to micromanage the front. It just does, at whatever level. Okay, but we're going backwards like that because today we have so much data. Absolutely, and then you get too much data. Yeah, LBJ directing troops during Vietnam War. Yeah, Blamorama. I definitely know doing like linebacker, which is the bombing operations against North Vietnam. They were definitely in the planning operations directing troops, but I'm talking about like, hey, I see the guy, literally on a phone call, if you will. I see the guy, he's getting ready to shoot, he's coming up, he's fired, they're like explaining what the guy's, firing at the Americans. Can I pull the trigger and shoot this guy? Yes, boom, bam, he dies. I mean, it's literally that kind of command loop, not just like, oh, well, the White House is planning, well, today when you launch, you go attack this bridge. You got permission to, launch the bridge. It's to the point, and they didn't have the command loop technology that I believe that you could call off the attack in progress from the White House during the LBJ days. But, so yeah, it was that kind of micromanaging of the front. Well, okay, I hope this has been an entertaining and interesting look. I really great. I learn a lot from watching some of the other streamers here on Slithering TV. They do some of them definitely depending on the game. I'll say I'm pretty good with things like Armored Brigade and others, but definitely learn a lot playing from the others, playing things like Field of Glory 2. Very good guys, and some of those guys do a better job playing the game and talking about the game than I do. But I try to talk about the context while we're playing the game. So I hope it's fun for you here. And I, of course, wanted to show off this game, do the duties of that, so if you're interested in it. I'm not trying to sell you on this or any of the games. If it's something too complicated for you, because not too complicated for you to understand, but too complicated for you to enjoy, because that's part of what we're doing here with these games, is you need to enjoy playing the game. If it's too fiddly, too complicated to have fun playing, don't buy this game. I'm telling you that this, and I think they would agree with me on it, because companies know that satisfied customers are much better than dissatisfied customers. So if this is the type of game you're interested in, I know it's out now. If you want to get it, wanted to show it off to you guys. And so follow the channel here. And as I just posted, we have my Twitch channel, which I mostly broadcast on for myself. Well, some random times, but mostly on the weekends. Was doing earlier this week a Warhammer 40K Gladius live stream, but so you might want to follow my Twitch channel. or my YouTube channel, where I have lots and lots of historical gaming videos and talking about this stuff. And yes, thank you, Gangster. I love discussing these topics with you guys. You also explain as you go along pretty well. Thank you. I hope I try to. And I'd like to say I've learned a lot from some of, whether it's Das Tactic, who was streaming earlier today, others, how to try to explain what I'm doing. I'm doing it from them. I've not got this game played, but I picked it up to a fair bit from watching it. So thank you. So yeah, I want to, show off how to play the game to help you learn it, and all that. So thanks, everyone. I will be back. Like I say, I'll be on my channel Saturday and Sunday. I will be streaming.